It was a few days before Christmas, and Alex was already feeling nostalgic for the snowy winters of London. As their car cruised along the vast, dusty roads of Australia, he sighed and said, "Where's the snow? It doesn't feel like Christmas without it." Dan, his travel companion and longtime friend, chuckled. "We're in Australia, Alex. Snow's not exactly part of the package here." The two friends had planned this trip for months. Tired of the same old festive routines back home, they decided to do something entirely different. With their office closed for 2 weeks over the holidays, they seized the opportunity to escape to the Southern Hemisphere. They had landed in Sydney 3 days ago, rented a sturdy car, and set off on an ambitious road trip to Alice Springs. It was a journey that promised adventure, stark landscapes, and a Christmas like no other. From the moment they left the airport, the road stretched endlessly before them. The landscapes were vast and untamed, with nothing but the occasional kangaroo or emu to break the monotony. At night, they stopped at small, isolated hotels, their rooms basic but sufficient. There were no festive decorations, no carolers, and certainly no signs of snow. The scorching heat made Alex grumble. "This doesn't feel like Christmas at all," he muttered. Dan, always the optimist, tried to cheer him up. "It's not about the decorations or the weather, Alex. It's about making memories. We'll look back on this trip and laugh about how strange it was." On the third morning of their journey, they left their latest hotel early, eager to cover more ground before the sun became unbearable. As they drove, the golden light of dawn painted the landscape in warm hues. Alex, staring out of the window, suddenly shouted, "Look, Dan! A kangaroo!" Sure enough, the animal bounded across the road ahead of them, its powerful legs carrying it effortlessly into the bush. They both laughed, their spirits momentarily lifted by the sight. As the hours passed, the novelty of the scenery began to wear off. The road seemed endless, and the oppressive heat made them drowsy. They stopped for a quick lunch of sandwiches and water, sitting on the hood of their car. "We're almost there," Dan said. "By tonight, we'll be in Alice Springs." But fate had other plans. When they returned to the car and Dan turned the key, nothing happened. The engine was silent. Alex's heart sank. "What's wrong?" he asked, panic creeping into his voice. "I don't know," Dan replied, popping the hood to examine the engine. "Everything looks fine to me." They were stranded. The nearest town was miles away, and they hadn't seen another vehicle all day. Their supply of water was limited, and the sun was relentless. Hours passed as they sat by the side of the road, hoping for a miracle. Alex's initial frustration gave way to anxiety. "What if no one comes? What if we're stuck here overnight?" he fretted. Just as despair began to take hold, Alex spotted something in the distance. A plume of dust rose from the road, signaling the approach of a car. "Dan, wake up! Someone's coming!" he shouted, shaking his friend awake. They both jumped to their feet, waving their arms to flag down the vehicle. It slowed to a stop, and a young man stepped out. He was tall, with long brown hair that framed his sun-kissed face. Despite the heat, he exuded a calm and confident demeanor. "Need some help?" he asked with a friendly smile. Dan explained their situation, and the young man nodded as he inspected their car. "You'll need a garage," he said after a few minutes. "There's one in the next town. I can take you there." Relieved, Alex and Dan climbed into the back seat of the young man's car. As they drove, he shared snippets of his life. He told them about the time he'd been stranded on a remote road for 10 days before help arrived. 10 days. Alex exclaimed. "How did you survive?" The young man shrugged. "You learn to adapt," he said simply. The drive to the town took a couple of hours, during which Alex and Dan dozed off in the back seat. When they arrived, it was already dark. The young man dropped them off near a garage and bid them goodbye. "Merry Christmas," he said before driving away. The mechanic at the garage promised to check their car the next morning. In the meantime, Alex and Dan checked into a nearby hotel. The woman at the reception handed them a key without a word, her expression somber. The hotel was old and unwelcoming, its corridors dimly lit. "Not exactly festive," Alex muttered as they entered their room. That night, they were woken several times by strange noises. It sounded like someone crying, a soft, mournful sound that sent shivers down their spines. "Do you hear that?" Alex whispered. Dan nodded, his face pale. "It's probably just the wind," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. The next morning, the mechanic fixed their car, and they were back on the road. By nightfall, they reached Alice Springs and checked into a much nicer hotel. As they settled into their room, Alex turned on the TV. A news report caught their attention. It was about a body that had been discovered near the road they had traveled. The victim was identified as John Sharp, a 19-year-old who had gone missing a year ago. Alex and Dan froze as a photo of John appeared on the screen. He had long brown hair and a familiar face. "It's him," Alex whispered. "He's the one who helped us." They stared at each other in shock. How could someone who had been dead for a year have come to their rescue? Dan finally broke the silence. "We met a ghost," he said, his voice trembling. "A Christmas ghost." The realization left them both awestruck. Though their journey had been filled with challenges, it had also brought them a story they would never forget. Their encounter with the Christmas spirit became a cherished memory, a reminder that miracles can happen in the most unexpected ways. Thank you for joining us on this magical journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales. Share this video with your friends and family on social media to spread the festive spirit. Let's make this season truly unforgettable together.